Hello learners, I'm Mr. Saul, and today we're going to be talking about the way different rocks have different looks. This is going to be all about the shapes of rocks. And as you can see, I have my words up here, rounded and jagged. Now, as scientists, it's very important that we use the correct words to describe things so that other scientists and learners know exactly what we're talking about. So as you know, rocks are shaped by the natural processes around us. A rough rock that's in a river might become smooth over time as water flows over it. A rock that breaks off a cliff would be sharp and jagged because it has not had time for all of those pieces of wind or water or sand brushing against it or washing over it to smooth the edges down. So today we're going to be talking about what makes a rock rounded and what makes a rock jagged. So here I have some examples of some of my own rocks that are both rounded and jagged. Here I have one of my favorite rocks. This one has a quartz line running through it. And as you can see, that line sort of sticks up a little bit more than the rest of the rock all the way around. That's because this line of crystal in here is very hard, much harder than this other rock around it. So as this rock was laying in a river somewhere, water would flow over it. And that water would have little tiny pieces of grit, which is the smallest little piece of a rock that you can get, like the size of a grain of sand. And as that sandy water washed over this rock, those little pieces would hit this rock and knock off other even smaller pieces. And over a long time, that took away all those sharp, jagged edges and made this rock nice and rounded. But since this line of crystal was harder, this crystal got knocked away much slower than the rest of the rock. So now it sticks out. And I just think that's one of the coolest things. This is a really great find. On the other hand, we have a rock that is very jagged. This one is one of the crystals from my collection, and this rock is all crystal, and you can tell that this rock never really sat in water or flowing water, and it wasn't exposed to the air and the wind because it's still so jagged. Look at all these sharp edges, and it feels so rough. It's not smooth, it's not round, very hard, very jagged, very pokey. That means that I can tell that this rock was broken off of something, a bigger rock, and then it was not exposed to any natural process. There was no water washing over this for a long time, no wind blowing on it, nothing like that. And I can tell because it's still so rough. Here's a rock. I've shown you this one a couple of times now. This is my tiger's eye. And you can see that this one wasn't just rounded, but it was polished. So they went through and made it even more rounded on a very, very small level, which is what a polish is. So this one is shiny and extra rounded. It's very smooth. This one is a rock that is not very smooth and rounded. You can tell that this one is very jagged, it has sharp edges. This one was not left out to weather or get eroded by time. There was no wind, no water, anything like that. This rock was broken off of a piece of a larger rock, put into the collection, and then shipped to me. So this one is like raw rock. This one has been weathered. Time has had time to roll over it and make it nice and rounded. Okay, next up, I'm going to show you guys some pictures of different rocks that are either jagged or rounded. All you guys have to do is explain how you know if it's a jagged rock or a rounded rock, and take a moment to try to describe what would have happened to the rock to make it look that way. If it's rounded, maybe it was out in a river or in the ocean or exposed to wind. If it's really jagged, then maybe it was a rock that was underground for a long time and just recently came up to the surface, so it hasn't had time to be rounded over by all of the elements like wind and water and rain, that kind of thing. Welcome back. I hope you were able to identify jagged and rounded rocks in all those pictures. And I also want to tell you guys before we go about something called a rock tumbler. A rock tumbler is something you can buy, and all you have to do is put your rocks into the container with some water and some grit or some sand, and then the rocks will tumble inside of this cylinder until they become rounded and smooth. So here are some before and after pictures of rocks before they went into the tumbler and after they came out. Now this is just like the natural wind and rain and water that would normally make a rock smooth and rounded out in nature. But a rock tumbler lets us do that process much, much faster. So a rock tumbler is a really great thing to show us the difference between jagged rocks and rounded rocks. And I'm gonna try to get a rock tumbler so we can do this at school when we come back. I hope you guys had a great time, and I will see you guys next time.